So red, blue, Vivi. This leader, my god. You don't even understand. So this was one that me and Manny, we thought this leader would be so insane. What is good, homies? This is Chris from the Small Hat Crew, and today I'm bringing you a different type of video. It's gonna be very similar to that History of Colors series I did in the past. Older viewers, or not older, but I guess viewers that have been here longer are familiar. It's a series I never finished because I didn't do red because red was a hot topic at the time, and you literally couldn't talk about red without pissing people off. And then yellow was a brand new color, so there was no history to cover. It literally had been out for like 1 or 2 sides. Anyway, we are going to be talking about leaders that on reveal had very, very high expectations. People thought they'd do great things. People thought that they would shape the meta in a certain way. For some of these, myself included, people really had higher expectations. We expected a lot from these leaders, and a lot of leaders overperformed. Some performed as well as we thought they would, and then other leaders did nothing. You know, when it comes to meta, there's a certain power level that you have to be able to meet to be able to compete with leaders that are meta, and these leaders unfortunately fell a bit short. When it comes to a stronger meta, there's just certain combinations of cards with certain leaders that abuse them better than others. Sometimes it makes you think like, I wish I could participate in like a more interesting or fun, diverse format where the same powerful cards aren't seen in every single deck. And if that isn't all that ever crosses your mind, you'll be happy to know that this Saturday I'm hosting a leader locked tournament. It's going to be a more fun format. So for example, if I was going to play Blurple Crocodile, I would only be able to play 7 Warlords of the Sea and Baroque Works cards and literally nothing else. I can tell you right now, like 6 of the best performing leaders are not going to be good in it, because you have leaders that, like Enel, that can't play Ace, Yamato, Katakuri, Black Yellow Luffy's nowhere to be seen because he can't play Gecko, Garp, Makino, Sabo, Red Purple Law can't play Gordon, Max Rays, Reiju, Kid Killer, Lucci literally can't play Annie's Lobby. I think that alone says everything, but also he can't play Gecko Moria. And then you're like, what about a leader like Gecko Moria? He just plays Thriller Bark. That man loses Rebecca, Sabo, Hina, Borsellino. Solitaire leaders like Nami can't participate either because they lose Love, Desert Spada, Impel Down All-Stars, Deathwing. So like, this is gonna be a very interesting format. We're gonna see leaders perform that have probably never done anything in the past, or they'll have to do it in a completely different way. I think Yamato's going to win. The ban list that exists for this tournament is literally just Black Blue Sakazuki leader and nothing else. Whitebeard can play cards like Moby Dick and all that, but he can't play like Radical Beam, Guard Point, etc. So if you're interested, the sign up link is in the description. It's $7 entry. $200 prize pool, so first place will get 100, second 60, third place 40, and yeah, that's pretty much it for that. But let's go ahead and jump into the video. We're gonna start off with Iceburg. Iceburg was a leader that I couldn't tell you why. Literally from day one, I told people this leader would be bad simply because he could not attack. Iceburg was a leader that came out, and people had very high expectations for him because he was a leader that without paying any Don, for simply minusing 1 Don, he could play a 5-cost character. Sounds very, very good on paper. The caveat was that he could not attack. And I think people highly underestimated just how big of a handicap that really was. So, we finally got Iceburg. Iceburg does nothing. He flops, and he is historically one of the worst leaders we had for a really, really, really long time until EBO1. What were the problems with Iceburg? Why did he do bad? Why did he flop? Why did he underperform? One, like I said, he couldn't attack. That meant that he could not fight for the board, and he couldn't pull counter out of the opponent's hand. So that meant, while every other leader would just get swinging 5k into the opposing leader would either get you closer to the win condition because the opponent would either take the life, or would shrink the opponent's hand because they'd have to counter. Every single turn, if they counter with 1 card and then they draw a card, you know, they're breaking even. Whereas Iceberg couldn't do that. So every single turn, because it's kind of like the Whitebeard tax, where you have to hit him for 6k every turn. You want to make him drop at least 1 card because he's picking up an extra card every turn. You want him to remain neutral. Iceberg could not do that. So every single turn, your opponent would draw cards, and their hand would grow and grow and grow, and there was nothing Iceberg could do to make the hand diminish in size. So by the time Iceberg finally was able to stick a body to the board and attack, the opponent had to counter, you know? Either the opponent had to counter, or they had so much advantage, or they were so far ahead that they could just freely take the attacks, because Iceberg can't starve, you know? So that was one of the big problems that he had. Because he couldn't fight for board, it also meant that Green could tap like Bonnies in his face, and he could do nothing about it. He literally couldn't do anything about it. A Bonnie Searcher could turn sideways, sitting there, tiny and vulnerable as possible, and there was nothing Iceberg could do about it. Bonnie would come out, tap, search a card, Iceberg would stare at it, pass turn, Bonnie would tap again, add another card to hand. Iceberg maybe stick a body to the board. If the opponent could answer the body, there's a whole other Turner Bonnie sitting on the board searching. Like, the opponent had literally twice as many resources to play the game with because they were never countering. It was very, 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 very bad. This is a very, very, very bad leader for very, very, I would say obvious, because like I said from day one, that's what would happen, and that's exactly what ended up happening with him. Not to mention his problem too was like he was a leader where if his board was answered, like I was saying previously, if you remove the characters from his board, he cannot attack. So he can't attack, he puts a body on board, the body gets answered. There's another turn where he has to stick a body and hope it makes it the next turn. Problem with this is that we were in a Whitebeard meta, aka we were in a red meta where leaders like Whitebeard, Zoro, and Red-Green Law existed. Cards like Jet Pistol saw play back then. Cards like Vista were seeing play back then. So like, Iceburg had a very hard time keeping anything on the board because he played 5-cost characters, which means on average they have 6k power. You know, cards like Marco are running around, Vista's running around, Jet Pistol hits every single card in that deck besides like Kaido. So that was a problem. Not to mention, because he had to play out of his hand, while his opponent's hand grew the entire game, his hand was shrinking because he had to keep pulling cards out of his hand to put them on the board. And then if your opponent answered them, not only were you back to square one, the card that you took out of your hand is now gone. You have nothing to show for it. You never pulled a card out of the opponent's hand. You never did anything. So it's really bad. His only good card was like Pauly, which ended up being better in other decks later on down the line. Not to mention, he also had an Onigashi mode, which basically meant that he was reliant on seeing his stage. Just him being behind in Dawn was already a problem that he didn't want to have to deal with, being as bad as he was. So that's why Iceburg was terrible for such a really long time. It took EBO1 giving him cards like Blueno, Blueno, and Khalifa so that he could play out of his hand, lose cards in hand, but he could get them back and stuff like that. He could grow a hand as his opponent's hand grew. He was a very, very, very bad leader. And after he came out and he did nothing for the longest time, and I said he was bad, and I said I was right that he was bad, people would be very upset. And people are like, I thought you said he was bad. He had, in this set, we had 370 leaders top, and Iceburg was one of them in the first week. If he's bad, how'd he get a top? And it's like, my brother in Christ, he is literally 0.025% of the tops in the set, and he never did it again once people learn how to play against the deck. So that's that. And then also after he got support in EBO1, and I said it was good support and he was good, people were like, I thought you said Iceburg was bad. It's like, this isn't even the same deck anymore. This deck has literally 4 more sets of cards to play with, 5 because EBO1 also. He has 5 more sets of cards to play with, and they're cards that I said he would need and cards that made him good. So I don't even know what your butt heard about here. But anyway, we move on to our next leader. Now, this is a leader, unlike Iceburg, who I said would be bad. Isho is a leader who I thought would be good. We have Black-Green Isho. What was good about this leader? He had access to black, which was a brand new color that we had received and had very high expectations for, because the Navy engine was decently powerful at the time. It got much stronger as time went on, but it was decently powerful. And he had a leader ability that let him do a board-wide -1, but the stronger ability, the reason people thought he'd be good was because black isn't as dominant as it is today, right? Back then, black wasn't as strong as it currently is, so while it could KO with card effects, it didn't happen nearly as often as it does now, and even when they did do it, they had to break even. You know, like Kobe took a discard, Sakazuki took a discard. That means for the most part, every single deck had to battle. They had to KO things through combat. Isho was a leader that would let you tap 1 Dawn to restand your board, and then you were good to go. You know, this is why we thought he would be good. Now reality sets in, we get the leader, he does nothing. Why is that? The man had 0 support. Little did we know, they would give him nothing. He came out in a set where the only Green Navy cards he got were Daddy Masterson and 8-cost Rosinante, and they gave him nothing else. What about the pre-existing Green Navy? There were only 3 cards. There was Starter Deck 2 Drake, there was OPO1 X Drake, and then Kobe was a vanilla. So realistically, he had 2 cards. Nobody thought Bandai would do that leader as dirty as they did. So that was one of the really big problems. He got no support to synergize with his leader ability. Not to mention he's a black-green leader, his colors do not synergize. Black is amazing for lowering cost so that other colors could take advantage of it to pop. Green is a color that just did not pop, it tapped. So you would have to, if you took 1 card out of your hand to minus the cost, the most you could do to capitalize off that is tap it. You still have to beat over it, you know, so it was just a terrible color combination. He also came out alongside Green Purple Dofi, which was a green leader that had access to purple, so that meant he could play the film engine better than Isho could because he also had access to cards like Buena Fiesta. He had access to cards like Guild Tesoro, so there was no reason to play Isho for the film engine because there's a leader that did it significantly better than him. He was also countered by Rebecca because he had a leader ability that let him restand. He was able to restand characters, right? Your opponent can't go after your active characters. He came out alongside Rebecca. 7 cost Luffy. Just beat over your active characters. It just did not matter. He was also a 4-life leader in a Whitebeard meta. And then, like I was saying before, Navy just wasn't the force it is today. The Navy package was pretty mid for a very long time. It took a leader like Black Blue Sakazuki to break it, and then it didn't become like the splashable powerhouse it currently is today until 8 cost Gecko became a thing. Because once 8 cost Gecko came out, it let you play cards like Helmeppo, because you could recur them off of Gecko Moria. You know, you're also able to splash, every black deck for a while was splashing 4 cost Lucci and other things like that. And then by the time, I was gonna say by the time, but as time went on, they still never gave him any new cards, right? I think he got like 2 cost Rosinante blocker and that was it. So even to this day, he is still suffering from his first main issue, just having no support. Bandai's done nothing to rectify that. And honestly, by the time he finally does get support, it'll probably be too late because the game's only gotten so much stronger by now that his leader ability, that second leader ability, is basically a non-factor. Because even if he restands something, you know, leaders like today, like Lucci, Gecko Moria, they'll just pop it, it doesn't matter. Now, moving on to our next leader. So this is the second leader I got wrong. Now you might be thinking like, oh wow, you got a lot of leaders wrong. That's actually not true at all. I went back to rewatched all of them. I probably get like 80+% of leaders right. Even the ones that people say I got wrong. You look back, the proof is right here. You can see I gave Rebecca a 4 out of 5. I gave Enel a 4 out of 5, and I gave Reiju a 4 out of 5. I don't know why those are 3 leaders that people constantly say I predicted wrong when the video's right there that says otherwise. I don't get it. People think if you offer any amount of criticism, that means that you think a leader's not good. You can think something is great while acknowledging it has flaws. So Red Blue Vivi, this leader, my god, you don't even understand. So this was one that me and Manny, we thought this leader would be fucking insane. We thought this leader would be so insane. So I guess let's go over what this leader did right. What were good things that this leader did? 1, the leader had an ability that for 2 Dawn would draw a card and give a character rush. Drawing a card means that this leader could never be starved. They always had to play as long as they had at minimum 2 Dawn. The leader's downside is that the leader cannot attack. I always knew that was a terrible. That was the reason I accurately predicted Iceburg would be bad, because I was able to identify that not being able to attack was a terrible handicap. The problem here is that because Vivi gave the character a rush, from my perspective, I was under the impression that would offset the fact that you couldn't attack, because you couldn't attack, but the characters you played could. You know, you'd get value out of them. Like Iceburg, for example, if his board got popped, he just couldn't attack. Vivi was supposed to offset that by letting the character get value out of them the turn they came out. So that was why I thought Vivi would be a good leader, because I felt that she was able to generate advantage and she was able to attack. The problem here was that her leader ability was too expensive. I didn't take that into consideration. The reason I say that is because with her leader ability costing 2, that basically costs the 2 Dawn that you gain every single turn. And that meant that every turn that Vivi uses her leader ability, she's playing bodies that were most impactful and efficient a turn earlier on the curve. So while you could play a character and you could swing with it, you know, there were characters that, like, if you did play them and you rushed them, your opponent should realistically already have a character on the board with stats big enough to challenge the character that you just threw out there and rushed. Because all the characters were like 2,000 power weaker than they should be on that current turn. And if they weren't, then it meant that she was either rushing vanillas or she was playing cards that had no count. And then not to mention, while she was doing that, her most powerful play that took advantage of this leader ability was drawing 1 card. So with leader ability, you would draw 2 cards, and that was the power play. Other power plays we look at today, like Gecko Moria could draw 2 cards and put 3 bodies on the board. So that's not all that great. Another problem with it was that she could play bodies that had like very suboptimal removal, like 7 cost, 8k Borsalino. She's a red blue leader. So Borsalino bottoms a 4. That means that's never bottoming anything more than a 4. Not to mention the colors also didn't complement each other. There's no synergy there whatsoever. Not to mention one of her colors was red. This was in a meta where so we're an entire set later, but we are still in a Whitebeard meta. This is a period where Bandai was very afraid of giving red good cards because they're afraid of buffing Whitebeard as a leader. So one half of her color pool was just getting neglected outright. The other half of her color pool was very, very mediocre for a very, very long time. Moving on to our next leader, we have a leader in Bello Betty. This was a leader that people had very, very high expectations. That's what the video's about, right? So I guess they all did, right? Of course, everybody had high expectations for all these leaders. So why did people think that Bello Betty would be good? Well, let's go over the good things first. Her leader ability converted one card in your hand to the equivalent of 9 Dawn. She gave 3 characters 3,000 power. 1 card, 9 Dawn, that's damn near double your Dawn. That's amazing. That was one very easy trap to fall into. Second thing, cards, she was given a card like Karasu. Karasu could get a video of his own, because Karasu was another card that people thought was going to be insane, myself included. It was the only card in the game that could minus the power of a leader. Minus 1,000 to your opponent's leader is fucking insanity, to be quite honest. I think if that card existed in any other leader, it'd probably be a lot better than it currently is. Luckily, the only thing keeping it in check is the fact that it's played in very underwhelming leaders. Finally, another thing she had going for her was that half of her color pool was yellow. Yellow was a very strong color at the time. Actually, at the time, it still is today. It's only gotten better as time has gone on, but it was a very strong color. Not to mention her red cards imitated the yellow identity of playing themselves out alive. With all of this going for her, what ended up being wrong with her? What was her downfall? What was her Achilles heel? 1, she was a 4-life leader, and that means that she's inherently more fragile and squishy, right? She's reliant on counter. Every 4-life leader has that problem though, right? So what's so bad about being reliant on counter? Her leader ability discouraged countering, because you have to discard a card to use her leader ability. So if you're discarding for your leader ability and you're discarding to counter, your hand grows, it does the opposite of grow, it ungrows, it shrinks. Your hand shrinks so much faster than every other leader in the game. On a 4-life leader, you can't have a small hand because it becomes so easy to map out lethal on you. Incredibly easy. Like at the point, and not to mention because she was a red-yellow leader, it also discouraged countering because you would want to take life in hopes of hitting a trigger to stick a body to board. It was a very high risk, low reward playstyle. It was a very low reward. Like, the reward did not justify all the downsides that came with this leader. She ran out of resources really quickly. Not to mention, because her hand shrank so fast, it was so easy to put her on like 2 life very quickly, which meant that she now was being forced to use her hand to counter. You map out lethal on her and it's over. Or she's betting on triggers and trying to steal the game that way. Relying on triggers to hit bodies out of life was terrible, because she came out alongside Black Blue Sakazuki. So if she took the gamble, so if she countered and her hand shrank, you would just keep going to her face and diminish her life. If she didn't counter and she took the hit and a body came out, a leader like Sakazuki would just remove her board. So that was one thing she had going against her, right? She couldn't keep a board. So her leader ability had nothing to pump, and even if she did use her leader ability, her hand shrank while leaders like Sakazuki would play cards like Rebecca and Mancherry to get bigger hands. Another problem this leader had, she came out alongside Yellow and No. His leader ability just inherently countered her playstyle. And then another thing she had going very badly for her. So I've named Sakazuki, I've named Enel. That's 2 of our leaders that were meta this set. We also had Purple Luffy. This was one of the most hyper aggressive aggro leaders that we had seen up to this point. He took advantage of her being a 4-life leader better than like no other. He would end the game so much faster. And not to mention, he was also able to stick bodies on board like 6k kid, right? He was able to drop a blocker in the process. So it was just very rough for Bello Betty. This leader just had so like the stars aligned to make her not viable. Everything that needed to go wrong for her did. Now we move on to our next leader. We have Red Purple Law. So this video, before you get upset and don't want to hear me, I want to dislike the video, because Red Purple Law is one of the best leaders of OP07 and is the best leader of OP08. This video is about leaders that were revealed and were expected to do things once they came out, and then they fell short. And Red Purple Law is one of those leaders. What was good about Red Purple Law? Everything. His leader ability was amazingly good. It was a very good leader ability. So then if that's the case, then what was wrong? His problem was the problem that I said he had the day he released. He was lacking support. He was lacking support that took advantage of his leader ability. People may try to argue, no, he was good. He was good in OP04. No, he was not. No, he was not. In a set where I believe there were 350 tops, Red Purple Law, he wasn't even 1% of the tops of the entire set. Not even 1%. You can't argue the 2 tops makes a leader meta when you look at a leader like Kuro in OP03. He was not meta. He just wasn't. It's as simple as that. Iceburg, he topped immediately in the first week of EB01, just like Red Purple Law did. Iceburg was not a good leader, just like Red Purple. He got his top, and he just never did anything again in that set. So let's go ahead and tackle all the things that made this an underwhelming leader at the time. He was a very high roll leader. He was very inconsistent. He was very reliant upon seeing the right combination of cards at the right time. This was because, first of all, he ran out of resources fast because cards like Reiju didn't exist yet. So he was reliant on seeing cards like Queen, for example. If he didn't see Queen, he was a 4-life leader with a small hand. We've already covered multiple different times in this video why that was bad. Why that is bad. If you are a 4-life leader and your hand is diminishing and you're putting your hand on the board like Iceburg was and your board gets answered, you're just getting punished. Which he was, because remember, this is OPO4. That was one thing he had going for him. He just ran out of gas really, really fast because a card like 4-drop Reiju just did not exist yet. He was also overly reliant on cards like Shachi and Penguin and Ein, which made it hard for him to reliably manage Dawn because cards like Bond Clay didn't exist yet. So it made it very easy for him to fall behind in Dawn. It made it hard for him to manage his Dawn. It made it hard for him just do a lot of things. Because there were a lot of times because you weren't consistently ramping your Dawn back. Because he's having to play cards back then like Round Table and stuff like that. He's having to minus his Dawn to panic remove things from the board so he doesn't die. But he doesn't have cards to get them back if he misses like on Shachi Penguin or Ein, you know, so that was another problem he had going for him. He also lacked counter. He was a 4-life leader that just didn't have a lot of counter because for like his 2Ks realistically, Shachi Penguin, I guess you could 2K with it, you know, it's physically possible to do so. But Shachi Penguin, like that was that leader, like he lived and died by Shachi Penguin. So realistically, every time you did your leader ability, you wanted to cheat out a Shachi Penguin. So that was a card you weren't really going to counter with. It was a card that was more than likely, it's kind of like black-green Perona, how she has Otama 2K as a 2K. But realistically, it's searching 99% of the time. So like it's one less 2K that Perona really has to work with unless he really has to. He also had a 2K Otama, which was a card that synergized with his leader ability. It was another 2K, like power reduction was a lot harder to come by back then. So cards like Otama, you wanted to use them to minus for your leader ability. And if you did have to counter with it, Race Max doesn't exist yet. You know, if you're having to use your Otamas as counter, then you're banking on seeing like, I have to see Gordon. You know, I have to see Gordon. Only 4 copies of it exist. I'm not drawing as much because Reiju doesn't exist yet as a card. So like 2 of his 2Ks he couldn't really play. He had to play cards like Khalifa realistically to be a 2K. And then he just lacked pressure for closing out games. Like a card like Kid and Killer was such a big buff for a leader like Red Purple. He just didn't have that back then. So it's also very hard for him to close out games. And then our final leader of this video, Red Purple Luffy. This is a leader that it's very like hard one to talk about because this is a leader I thought would be amazing. And I don't even think this is a wrong prediction on my part. Because this leader had everything he needed to be good. So he was a 6K leader. He was incredibly aggressive. He had an amazing card pool. He had characters like 7-cost Kid to pump him to a 7K leader. He had cards like 9-cost Whitebeard to pump him to an 8K leader. He could even go 9K very consistently. He would have been the original Black Yellow Luffy, realistically, now that I think about it. This leader was supposed to be amazing. The one thing that nobody accounted for. And of course you couldn't, right? You couldn't account for it. So this is one of those things where like everybody thought he'd be good and no one's wrong for saying that he would be because he was supposed to be. But there was a leader that was destroying the meta for his 3rd set in a row, and that was Whitebeard. Whitebeard was tier 0 for such a long time. And because he was so oppressive, a ban list was finally dropped to address him. And it hit cards like Radical Beam, it hit cards like Nami, it hit cards like Ninebeard even. This ban list came out and all the reasons that Red Purple Luffy was supposed to be good were taken from him before he even came out. Before he came out nerfed. The leader literally came out and did not get to be good for all the reasons he was supposed to be. He was just punished immediately through the fault of Whitebeard. And then by the time that Whitebeard, the list was reverted and all those cards came off the list, they were legal to be played again, it was OPO5. Luffy sticking one body to the board, right? In a meta where like Sakazuki exists. If Luffy puts a Whitebeard on board, it gets bottom decked. What do? You know, he's also hiding behind so many blockers. But even more damning for him wasn't Sakazuki, it was Enel. Luffy, again, he's putting one body on board every single turn once he hits his 8 Dawn. That means nothing to Enel. You literally cannot kill Enel as Red Purple. Like, that might be his worst matchup. Everything that was supposed to make him amazing was stripped from him. He never got to play around with it, and by the time he finally could, the game just was not the same anymore. I think it was the set where power creep finally really happened because Sakazuki, Purple Luffy, Yellow Enel came out. And those are 2 leaders that would still see play today. Enel still sees play to this day. Sakazuki's banned. you know, that's where we currently are. Those were the leaders he had to compete with once he finally got his support back. I do think Red Purple Luffy may have probably been the strongest leader that a leader could have been in their set had it not been for that ban. But either way, with all of that being said, there are a lot more leaders. I'm not sure if you noticed, I did these in chronological order. If you like this video, if you find this interesting, if this is something you find entertaining, drop a like on the video so I know to go ahead and, you know, work on that. I also haven't forgotten about like the custom support. Me and Garen want to do one for Black Green E-Show next. So that is still a work in progress. I've not forgotten about that. And also, yeah, if you're not already subscribed, if you can listen to me after 30 plus minutes, there's no reason not to subscribe. That makes no sense. On top of that, if you do want to compete, don't forget that there is a tournament this Saturday. It is the Leader Locked Small Hat Global. So again, thank you for making it this far. And until next time, I will see you guys.